We're going through Parshas Vayetzei with the commentary of Rabbi Menachem Mendel Kasher. First of all, I want to mention as a somebody who writes Torahs, well, I'll tell you a story about a Torah, and then this week's parsha is unusual because it has no openings, no openings, no psuchos or stumos, no paragraph breaks in the writing of the Torah. So therefore, it's the Ger Rebbe says it's to remind us that even though Jacob left the land of Israel to go outside, he never took his mind off of the land of Israel. I was going to tell you a story about a Torah scroll. This happened to me yesterday. When I went to, I told the story to Jeff last night. He was at the yeshiva, but I'll tell it to you again. A Torah scroll, a new Torah scroll, you can buy now for over $100,000. But there was this boy, when I went to Israel in after October 7th, I went like a week after to try and give some, inspiration and connection to the people in Israel, to tell them they weren't by themselves. There was a young man who traveled with me there, but he had a one-way ticket because he grew up in America. He served in the IDF instead of going to college. And then after after serving, he came back here, went to college, and then was about to enroll in medical school. And he has a baby and a wife. But then October 7th happened, so he decided to put his medical school on hold and go and enroll back in his unit. He wasn't called; he just decided to enroll back in the unit because he felt the calling to protect Am Yisrael. So he served in Gaza over the last year, in and out. It wasn't every day. They gave you some time off. And then I happened to be speaking to him yesterday, and he said to me, "Can you write?" He wants to get a Torah scroll. So he asked me if I could write him one. He didn't know what they cost. So I said, "I'll make you a deal. I'm going to trade you my Torah scroll in exchange for a portion of the heavenly reward you got from God for your service." Because I can't think of anything braver and more I don't know what the word is, gave so much of itself to re-enlist when he didn't need to, and served over the last year. So I said, just give me a portion of that in exchange for the Torah. And he thought that was a good deal, but I know that it was a deal of my life. So I want to share that with you, that everybody who supports the yeshiva, basically you're helping me do this. And then in exchange, we're getting some of the reward from heaven that this young man got for his service over the past year. And I felt such a plus. I wanted to share that with you because you're all supporting our work. Okay, so now we go to the parasha. I'm going to share all the midrashim on the first verse. What's the first verse? Vayetzei Yaakov mi Beersheva vayelech Harana. Jacob departed from Beersheva and he went to Harana. So Rabbi Kasher has, on this verse, he has 13 midrashim. I don't know if we're going to go over all of them slowly, but we'll go into them. So it says Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, it already said Jacob listened to the voice of his father and mother, and he went to Padan Aram. So that's the first question the Midrash is asking. It already says that he left. Why is it saying it again? It says at the end of last week's portion, he went to Padan Aram. So why does it have to say it twice? So why does it say here Vayetzei Yaakov? So it says Rabbi Chizkiah, Yaakov made a stop. He didn't go straight. What did he do for the last 14 years? He stopped in the land for 14 years, and he had to go over his studies with the elder Aver, and he got a farher. He went over his Torah studies for the last 14 years. So therefore, that's what he was doing. That's why I mentioned twice. Yaakov did two departures. first he went out, and when he left, he was 63 years old, and when he got there, he was 77. So for 14 years, he studied in the yeshiva of Aver, and it was only after that. So I guess the idea is that a person, before they leave the land, before they go out into the world, we need to strengthen ourselves with Torah study. We need to remind ourselves who we are, and that'll give us the strength as we go out to the world. And this is the concept, which is that a Jew, before he goes into the world, needs to study and fortify and strengthen himself by studying in the yeshiva. That's the first midrash. The second midrash, and the first one comes from what's called the Midrash Hagadol. The second midrash, also it's from Midrash Hagadol, says as follows: Amar Rabbi Shimon Levi. Why does it say Jacob left? Didn't it already say at the end of last week's portion Jacob left? So what does it mean by Vayetzei? So it says that Jacob said, "Haray Avi v'imi natnu li reshut latzeit l'chutz la'aretz." So he said, my father and my mother gave me permission to go out to leave the land. Should I say that God also wants that I should go out and raise children there? He went to ask permission from God. Just like where else do we see Vayetzei, meaning that he went out and to ask permission from God? Anybody remember where else we see such a terminology where he went out and it means he went out to ask permission from God? Anybody remember? This is the Midrash. In the Midrash, everything is connected. The whole Torah is connected. Where else do we see this type of language? So it says in Exodus chapter 9, verse 33. It says in Exodus chapter 9, verse 33, that Moses went out from Paro. He left the city. He went to pray to God. So we see that the word Vayetzei, he went out with an expression of reaching out and asking something from God. So just like Moses went out to ask from God at that moment, also Jacob went out here. He was going out to ask from God. He was going out to ask from God. So we see from here a couple of things. First of all, we see from here the idea that it's not so simple to leave the land of Israel. They used to say about a couple of the great rabbis of the previous generation that they never went to Israel because they felt that if they went, they wouldn't be able to leave. They said that about the Lubavitcher Rebbe. They said that about Rabbi Moshe Feinstein. They said that about Rabbi Soloveitchik, that you wouldn't be able to leave if you actually went to Israel. And so therefore they never went. And so therefore they never went to Israel. And so therefore, also Yaakov, even though the land was basically destroyed and he had no choice, he felt that he had to ask permission to go out. And would he be allowed to leave? Would he be allowed to leave? Because it's not so simple to be allowed to leave. And so therefore, Yaakov had to ask permission. What are the reasons that you're allowed to leave? So here we see actually it's very similar to selling a Torah scroll. A person is not allowed to sell a Torah scroll, except the Gemara we saw a few weeks ago says that you're allowed to sell a Torah scroll for two purposes. What are the two purposes that you're allowed? Anybody remember? What are two purposes you're allowed to sell a Torah scroll? We saw this. Anybody remember? Yeah?
Get married.
To get married. My father, of course, knows. One is to get married, Lisa Isha, and what's the other one? The other one is Lilmo Torah. So a person is allowed to sell a Torah scroll, to study Torah, to raise money to pay for their tuition, and also basically to get married. And so Yaakov Avinu was leaving Israel. So he wanted to know if he had permission to go. That's why it says he had to go and ask God again for the permission to go out, because it's not so simple to leave the land of Israel. I just saw in the news today that they said 1,000 people just joined the Israeli army this month, who are not citizens of Israel, and 750 of them are there by themselves, that they came to without any family just to join the Tzahal. Okay, the next midrash is as follows. It says Vayetzei Yaakov. It says Jacob departed. Ksiv lech ami ba b'chadarecha. The verse in Isaiah says, "Go, my people, come into your room." What does this mean? What does this mean? So at the time that you see the hour is pressing, don't stand. Rather, provide the space. Meaning to say, whoever stands at that moment will lose the opportunity. So too Jacob, that he fled at that moment. Vayivrach Yaakov stay Aram. At that moment, basically Yaakov seized the moment. That's what this midrash is telling us. And basically what the midrash is saying is Yaakov had the opportunity to act at that moment, and he couldn't wait. That's what it says. Vayetzei Yaakov. I guess the midrash is emphasizing he left with haste. Now, and this is one of my favorite expressions is that the Lubavitcher Rebbe used to say that anything worth doing is worth doing right away. Anything worth doing is worth doing right away. Okay, the fourth midrash on this word, Vayetzei Yaakov. So, what is this? This midrash comes from. I'm not sure where it's from, but the midrash is as follows. It says, Ragle Chasidav Yishmor. It says in book of Shmuel, chapter 2, verse 9, the legs of the pious ones God will protect. Once Jacob departed from his father's house, when Jacob departed from his father's house, he left only with his staff. Because he says, we know when he comes back, he says, with my staff, I crossed over this Jordan. God said to Yitzchak, so too, so God says to Yitzchak, Avram, your father, gave you everything. But Yitzchak didn't do that to Yaakov. Yitzchak sent off Yaakov with nothing. So God says, so the Midrash says, V'choshech miushar achla machzor, meaning to say that Yaakov was in that moment of darkness. So what happened? The divine presence departed from him. So let's see what Rabbi Kasher says about this. He says as follows. That he compares it to when Eliezer went to bring back Rebekah. It says, and the servant took 10 camels. And Jacob said, I'm not even bringing a bracelet or a ring. So says Rabbi Yoshua, Rabbi Hanina said, he sent him empty-handed. Rabbi Yoshua says, no, he went out with stuff, but Esav took it from him. He said, this is the Midrash that says that so there's a whole question, did Yaakov go out empty-handed? But one version is that he went out with nothing, but another version is that Esav sent off his son Eliphaz, who took it from him, because he told him to kill him. This is what Rashi says. He had told him to kill him, but in fact, what happened was, he said, I'm going to just make you poor instead of killing you. And so he took everything from him. And that's what the next midrash that he cites is from Bereshit Rabbah. So it says Vayetzei Yaakov. So the Midrash says, was Jacob the only one who departed? Didn't he take several camels and donkeys? So Rabbi Azariah says in the name of Rabbi Yehuda Bar Simon, it's to teach us that when a tzaddik is in the city, who ziva, who adara, when a tzaddik is in the city, he's the splendor, he's the glory. So therefore he departed, and all the splendor and glory departed. So the question is, but says the Midrash, but Yitzchak was also there. Why do we say that the splendor and the glory have departed? Wasn't Yitzchak also there? So the Gemara says, no, you can't compare one tzaddik's departure to Odomeh Schut Tzaddik Echad or Schut Beit Tzaddikim. When Yitzchak was there, Yaakov was also there. And when you have two tzaddikim, it was especially righteous. But now that you don't have the two tzaddikim, you only have one. That's not as great. We see from here, we mentioned that in insurance, it's called the Key Man Insurance Company. You're relying upon one person to bring their glory. If that's the case as it relates to insurance, how much more so on a spiritual level? A tzaddik in a place is able to transform the place. You think of these towns, I've been to Ukraine, I've been to Poland. You go to these places that were the towns of these holy tzaddikim, and now they're no longer there. The towns are not holy anymore. Like the Chafetz Chaim lived in Radin. I was in Reb Elimelech's town of Lezhensk. I was in Reb Zusha's town of Anipoli. These places, when the tzaddik was there, was the whole city. It was like fire. But now, I'm not criticizing the people who live there now. I'm just saying with these places, there are holes in the wall. Nobody would ever go there for any other reason. The tzaddik has departed. They've lost their glory. Okay, so now we're up. Since we've spoken about the word Vayetzei. Yeah, Bill, you're trying to say something? Okay.
No, sorry, no.
Okay. So now we go to the word Beersheba. So what does it mean that Jacob departed from Beersheba? What does Beersheba mean? Beersheba meaning, is it the town of the 7 wells? What is Beersheba? So the Midrash says that this is the place of oaths. Mi be'ira shel shavua. It says as follows. Says Rab Yudan Rav Huna, and Rab Yudan said, Mi be'ira shel shavua, from the well of an oath. What oath are we talking about? He said, I took an oath. Shlo yamod imi Avimelech vayomer li hishavu li ki Moshe nishba li zekenecha. He said, I don't want to stand where Avimelech made my father stand and take an oath and where my grandfather stood. I don't want to be bound by an oath to Avimelech. That's the first reason why he departed. He didn't want to be bound by an oath to Avimelech. This is what the Midrash is saying. A second explanation is from the well of the firstborn. He said, I don't want Esav to stand and say, you deceived me. You took my firstborn and caused me to violate and cause an oath to be violated. As it says, Hishavali Kayom. Because Jacob said to Esav, swear to me today. So those are the first two ideas. Either Jacob did not want to be bound by an oath to Avimelech of the Philistines, or he did not want to cause Esav to violate an oath. Esav had taken an oath to give him the firstborn. So therefore he said he had to get out of that situation. Couldn't be in a situation where either he would be beholden to Avimelech or he would force Esav to lie. A third answer is from the well of blessing, meaning to say, he said, I don't want Esav to stand against me and say, this is how you deceive me. You took my blessings. And so therefore, he would lose everything. So he basically removed, according to all these approaches, Yaakov is removing himself from a difficult situation. We see from here that if the situation is too difficult, it's okay to move on. The next midrash comes from Pirkei Rabbi Elazar. Pirkei Rabbi Elazar, a beautiful midrash, a 3rd century midrash, says Jacob departed from Beersheba. What does the midrash say? He was 77 years old when he left his father's home, and the well was walking before him from Beersheba until Mount Moriah, which was a distance of 2 days. And he came in the middle of the day, and he met God. As it says, he met God there, and he slept there because the sun had set. And there, he left the well, and there he lifted up his legs, and in a moment he came to Haran. What is the meaning of this midrash? This midrash is very, very mysterious. I think we have to read it as follows. This is the way I read it. This is a mysterious midrash, but this is the way I read it. That Yaakov needed to be sustained. He was being sustained by the well. That's the spirituality. And he needed to be sustained until he came to Mount Moriah. When he had Har Moriah, he had so much spiritual strength. He didn't need that well anymore. He had the Temple Mount. And in a moment, he was able to go to Haran. He had the tremendous spiritual strength that he reached that place. He's still in the first verse, Vayelech Harana, and he went to Haran. What does this mean? So, says Rabbi Zera, God, why does it have to say, Vayetzei Yaakov Beersheva Vayelech Harana? God caused the journey to be very quick. Tarchiv tzadi tachteni. What's the meaning of this? That Yaakov had kfitza saderach. He had a very quick travel. What's the significance of this? We know that one other person in the midrash has kfitza saderach. That's Abraham's servant. I think that there's 2 possible meanings to my mind. One is that when we have a desire to do a mitzvah, Hashem will help us to do it as quickly as possible. It'll be like supernatural how quickly we can do it. God will help us. Alternatively, we could say it means that when we're going to do a mitzvah, any obstacle that might be in front of us will be removed by Hashem. We're not going to be stopped to do the mitzvah. Nothing will prevent us. So Yaakov had kfitza saderach. He had a journey to go on his way to Mount Moriah. And then on his way, when he was on his journey, because Yaakov basically was doing a mitzvah. What was the mitzvah? He was honoring his parents. He was running away, removing himself from this situation, which was very dangerous. Okay, one more, actually 2 more midrashim on this verse. This comes from the Yalkut, Vayelech Harana. People now travel for pleasure. A lot of people travel for pleasure. It used to be that travel was a punishment. So it says, Galut mechaperet avon. Exile will forgive our sins. As it says, Jacob departed and he went to Haran. So since he left his land and he went to exile, the word Haran means the wrath of the wrath. So it means the wrath of God departed from him. So that's what the Midrash is saying. The wrath of God departed. And then the last Midrash on this verse. What is actually that'll be the last one we do in this verse. Now we go up to the next verse. So the next pasuk is a very powerful verse. We spent a lot of time on it. Vayifka b'makom, vayoen sham kiva hashemesh, vayikach mi'avnei hamakom, vayasem mirashosav, vayishkav b'makom mahu. What a powerful pasuk. Jacob came to that place and he slept there because the sun had set. And he took from the stones of the place, he took from the stones of the place and he placed them at his head and he slept in that place. What's going on here in this pasuk? Rashi says, Vayifka b'makom, the word Vayifka, which means encounter. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says the prayers were instituted by our patriarchs. The evening prayer came from Jacob, as it says, he came to the place, Vayifka, and the word Pagia means to pray, as it says, Vayifka una b'Hashem tzvakos, as it does in Jeremiah, please now beseech God. V'omer al tisab adam rina v'tfila v'al tifka bi, as it says in Jeremiah. So we see that the word Vayifka, which means to be encountering, to come in contact with, means to pray. Jacob, and that's how Jacob instituted the evening prayers. That this is the idea that Jacob instituted the evening prayers. There's other ideas about what the prayers were instituted. So here we're saying this midrash or this Gemara is saying that the prayers were instituted corresponding to the 3 times that our patriarchs prayed. That Abraham instituted the morning prayer, Isaac the afternoon prayer, and Jacob the evening prayer. And there's also the idea that the prayers were instituted corresponding to the sacrifices. And this is from the Gemara in Brachos that Abraham instituted the morning prayer corresponding to the morning sacrifice. Isaac instituted corresponding to the afternoon sacrifice, and Yaakov corresponding to the burning of the limbs on the altar in the evening. There's another idea that the prayers were instituted corresponding to the 3 times a day that the day changes. And so these are different ideas about what the prayers are about. The 3 times a day that the day changes. Okay, so now Vayifka b'makom, what happened? So the other midrash says at that moment Jacob had divine providence, and he prophesied, and Jewish people in the future would sin, and the divine prophecy would depart from them, as it states, "V'im yesham devar Hashem itam yifkeuna." So Pagia is a prophecy. So Jacob prophesied at that moment that in the future the Jewish people it wouldn't always be great, that there would be a time where they would lose it. Okay, so here too we have to understand that everything was predicted. Now, why does it say that the word makom, vayifka b'makom? Where else do we use the word makom? The makom means God. Where else do we use the word makom to mean God? Anybody know? Where else do we use the word makom to mean God? So there's two very famous times where the makom is used to mean God. One is during the Shiva, when a person is Rahman al-Aslan visiting a Shiva, you say a makom yinachem Islam, and that's a reference to God comforting you. And also, anybody remember the other time where the word makom, which technically means place, is a reference to God? So, anybody remember? In the Haggadah, where we say Baruch HaMakom, Baruch Hu, blessed be the place, but that's a reference to God. So the word Makom is twice in very powerful places. The word Makom, the place, is a reference to God. So the Midrash, there are 2 different Midrashim that take this up. One is Bereshit Rabbah, and one is Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. And they have 2 different answers. So the first is the Bereshit Rabbah. It says, why is God called, in this context, Vayifka b'makom, why is God referred to as the place?
Rabbi?
Yes.
And Jacob's wrestling with the angel.
So the first, The first midrash is why is God called Makom here? Because Hu Mikomo Shel Olam, he is the place of the world. Ve'ein Olamo Mikomo. God is the place of the world, and the world is not his place. God is the place of the world, but the world is not his place. Meaning the world inhabits God's space. God does not inhabit the world space. That's the first approach by Rav, I think it's Rav Huna in the name of Rabbi Ami. But comes along Rabbi Yossi Bar Chalaft and he says, we don't know if God is the place of the world, if the world is his place. Why does it say Hinei Makom Iti? This is from Exodus 33:21. Parshas Kisisa. It means to say God is the place of the world and the world is not his place. So, I don't know, that's very deep. Rabbi Kasher adds a couple of other ideas here. He says, he found a written manuscript. It says, Lama nikra shmo makom shemekim dvarav with tzadikim. The word makom basically is reference the word to uphold. And it says God sustains the words of the righteous. I actually think it's interesting that Jacob is leaving the place of the land of Israel, and so he came to the place, the prominent place of Mount Moriah, came to the place of the land of Israel, and the Midrash is saying God's place is, the whole world is God's place. Jacob has to remember that even while he's leaving, Jacob has to remember that the whole world is God's place, even as he's leaving the land of Israel. And there's another midrash about this. It says, "Upaga bo ba'kadosh baruch hu shenemar vayifga b'makom." Why is God called makom? So this takes the opposite approach, because he's saying any space that the righteous are there, he's found with them. As it says, "B'kol makom asher azkir et shemi," wherever I mention my name, I'll come to you and bless you. Meaning to say, wherever the tzaddikim are standing, God will come there. It says in Midrash, Mi akum b'mkom kadsho. That's Jacob. It's vayifga b'makom. I think this Midrash, the way I understand this Midrash, saying as follows. Yaakov Avinu must have felt so confused, so disillusioned. He was leaving his home. He's leaving his spiritual center. He's leaving his father. He's basically homeless on the road, sleeping on the road by stones. He doesn't know where he's going. And it's at that place he finds God. As Deborah cited, the Pasuk says God is in this place. And this is what this Midrash is saying. Wherever the tzaddik is, God is going to come. You don't need a specific place in order to see God there. And I guess we're living this message right now. Like, where is this Torah study session taking place? It's taking place not in a specific place, but in the ether world, like in space. But God's presence is there. It's not in a physical location. Wherever you are doing something righteous, God will come there and be found there. So that's the idea behind it. That's what I see. If anybody has other ideas, I'm happy to address them. And then it states, he took from the stones of the place. This is one of my favorite midrashim. Rav Yehuda says, he took 12 stones. Amar Kach Gadar Kadosh Baruch Hu Shemamed Yud Beis Shvatim. So he said, God agreed that Jacob should hold up 12 tribes. Avram did not do it. Jacob did not do it. So he took 12 stones and lined them up corresponding to the 12 tribes. What's the significance of that? I'm not sure. This is the one that Rashi cites coming from the Gemara in Chulin 91a. Jacob took from the stones of the place. It says later on, Vayikachas Eved. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, that teaches us, Sheniskavtu Koatzan Avanim L'Makom Echad. He took all the stones and put them in one place. Each one said, Alai Aniach Tzadik Zerosho. I want the righteous one to rest on my hand. And also, all together, all of them were swallowed into one. So this is the idea that the stones all wanted to be part of a holy task. We had this idea, actually, we came across the stones, the spirituality of stones. Actually, we were studying on Shabbos afternoon a couple of weeks ago that the concept of reincarnation in the Judaism, and we saw that there's a Kabbalistic idea that if you've done something wrong, you can come back as a stone, which is the lowest form of reincarnation because you can't even move, you can't even raise your voice. But it's also the idea that the stones have a spirituality to them, which is, on the one hand, very hard idea to understand, but on the other hand, is also a very deep idea because what it's telling us is that we have to recognize and treat everything in the world with respect because it's possible that they all have this spirituality within them. And so therefore, we wouldn't treat any of these stones with disrespect. Another midrash that Rabbi Kasher cites is that God says, just like these stones became one, so also your sons will all be tzaddikim. Of course, we related to stones in this in the Hallel, which we recited this morning. Evan masu abonim haisel rosh pinah. The stones that the builders despised became the cornerstone. The part of our life that we despised, that we hated, that was torturous to us, that became a cornerstone of our life. So, just one more midrash here, but then I'll take the question. But this is a very powerful one. Where did Jacob get these stones? Where did Jacob get these stones from? So this is what the Pirkei de Rebbe Elazar says. What a powerful idea. Anybody remember where he got these stones? So first of all, he was on Mount Moriah. What else happened on Mount Moriah? Well, 10 things happened, and one of the things that happened was the Akedah, the binding of Isaac. So he took these stones from the stones that Isaac, his father, had been bound upon, and he put them under his head. So God came to tell him that in the future, 12 tribes would come forth from that, and they would become one stone, that they are going to be together, one nation in the world. So this is a powerful idea that Jacob, as I was saying, Jeff showed me the card yesterday about Mount Moriah, 10 things. And Jacob took the 12 stones from the trauma of Isaac, and he took the altar, the stones from the altar, and he put his head on that. And God was telling him the 12 tribes were going to come, meaning that from these stones, from this trauma of the Akedah, from this trauma of Jacob running, they're going to have the one nation, one great nation would come from that. Okay, I mean, I think, there's so many beautiful, incredible midrashim that the sages love from this point.